At the conclusion of the first act of Branden Jacobs-Jenkin's play GLORIA, the titular character shoots and kills her co-workers and herself. This is after an act's worth of foreshadowing from the others about how strange, off-putting, yet wholly uninteresting she is. GLORIA spares one co-worker, Dean, because he attended her party the night before. Others make it out alive as well, only because they weren't there, or were hiding in their offices amidst the panic. What seems to be a call for gun control, or at the very least mental wellness checks for gun owners, takes a left turn in the next act where Jacobs-Jenkins dissects the survivors' feelings and reactions to the violence. And it's not all therapeutic hugging and learning. There is monetary value in this experience that everyone is willing to mine to make their trauma feel worth something. In this video, we will be looking at the thesis statement of Jacobs-Jenkins' GLORIA, namely, who owns a story? And how three characters explore this. Through the journeys of Dean, Kendra, and Nan, we can see how each interacts with GLORIA, writes about her, and who ends up on top. But before we get into that, I want to say hello to any old subscribers, hello to any new viewers. Welcome to my Hodgepodge YouTube channel, where I talk about anything and everything that I find interesting. Welcome to the first video of 2022, where we are going to try and up the quality of every video that I make, and hopefully I can dress in something that is thematically relevant to whatever I'm talking about. Today, I'm talking about a play that I have a personal interest in, as well as a playwright that I have a very personal interest in. But last time we talked about gay films that I really liked, so anything can happen on this channel if we will it to happen. But I do take suggestions in the comments below. The queer films video was a suggestion from a subscriber, so please comment on this video, like this video. I will interact with you because I like interacting with you. I want to know that this is the kind of content that you guys want to see. So enough with that, let's get back to the musings. Typical of Jacobs-Jenkins plays, hereafter referred to as BJJ, the action takes place over 3 acts with a jolting bit of development occurring at the end of the first third. In GLORIA's case, it's her act of going postal. This really is the inciting incident for the play, as the rest of the drama unfolds as a direct consequence of her. Truth be told, there is not a lot of footage of this particular play out there, so I'm going to be using clips from theaters who have uploaded previews and trailers and whatnot, as well as the raw, unedited footage from the production that my college put on where I played Dean. We are going to start with Dean, not because of narcissism, but I think it's important to analyze things from least successful to most successful. Dean, when he first enters, is hungover. Again. Not only did he attend networking functions the night before, but he went to GLORIA's lame party, which everyone else was too embarrassed to even be seen at. Dean went because he figured it would be a networking opportunity, but drank himself away to cope with the embarrassment.
Yeah, well, once I showed up last night and realized I was the only idiot who came, I had to drink enough to forget I was there. So, for the record, the way I'm feeling is sort of your fault.
Kendra makes fun of him, but that's a staple of their dynamic.
Dean, what's going on? You look like shit. Hi.
Dean's prime riffing fodder comes when an early draft of his autobiography is found in his desk.
Dean has a book proposal on his desk. So? It's his. He does not. A memoir. A memoir about what? Zine Dreams. Or ambition.
Yes, Dean is writing a book about his life with the potential for it to become a runaway bestseller so he can escape the dreary office life he settled himself into. This is also the reason he networks so heavily, as he sees no upward momentum in the current office dynamic. He works under Nan and is more or less a glorified assistant, routinely scheduling her flights and, at least in the present, cleaning up her vomit.
Is that a bag full of puke?
Dean is sympathetic to the plights of others, but is jaded due to his lot in life, expecting himself to be further up the chain as he turns 30.
For example, this cautionary tale.
Excuse me?
Don't you hold the title for the longest living assistant on Edit Row?
No, Daisy's been here the longest.
Daisy doesn't count. She's the assistant to the editor-in-chief, which is basically an associate editor. And I said longest living. Aren't you turning 30 any day now?
At one point he tells Miles, the office intern, that he joined a Buddhist monastery in order to have something interesting to write about. His life is a meandering mess of unfulfilled potential until GLORIA spares him. Then, Dean is thrust into the limelight and doesn't cope with it well. We learn in Act 2 that he suffers a nervous breakdown, moved back in with his parents, and has extensively rewritten his book to include mentions of GLORIA.
Well, after GLORIA and the media stuff, I sort of had a breakdown and had to be hospitalized.
He appears to grow out from under the thumb of Nan, but reverts when everyone somehow meets up in the same Starbucks. The last we see of him in the show, he has a panic attack and pathetically attempts to get Nan to have a meeting with him. The Dean in Act 1 and the Dean in Act 2 aren't as contrary as one might believe because they are both about a desperate person on the mend. Dean's aspirations to network and expand his professional life are undermined by his drinking, and his drinking undermines his performance at the job, where he barely gets by. And I'm not really talking financially. Anybody in Dean's position would be making a comfortable $60 to $70K in New York in 2016 when the play opened off-Broadway. I'm meaning that he has begun to phone it in, pestering Kendra and taking the intern Miles for granted. The hierarchy there is interesting because Dean uses Miles a lot like how Nan uses Dean, for petty jobs that are way under what he's expected to be doing.
And go get a purple vitamin water from the vending machines.
Sure.
You are the worst.
He's our intern.
You never had to get anyone a vitamin water.
Dean shows Miles some compassion when he asks to speak to Nan about job opportunities, but becomes extremely jealous when Nan shows, or maybe feigns, interest in Miles' future.
He sat here and gave me this whole spiel about how he didn't know what he wanted to do after college, or if he was even interested in magazines, and now he's probably going down on her in there.
He's just a sweet, likable guy.
No, he's a wooer and a seducer and just as cutthroat and ambitious as you or me, I promise.
You can tell that he's probably about to sabotage Miles' advances right before GLORIA comes along. The bait and switch of the situation is, you might initially think that Dean is the one that is going to go postal to the office because he is the one that is the most desperate and the most emotionally unhinged at times. And he also threatens violence against Kendra quite a bit. He is so closely linked to GLORIA in this moment that it's fascinating she chooses to spare him, all because he showed up to her party. And for ulterior motives to boot. Because of his ties to her, he either decides or is forced into including aspects of the tragedy into his book, which is originally called Zine Dreams, but the title is switched to GLORIA in order to sensationalize on the tragedy. His story, in this form, is not being marketed as his story. It's GLORIA's. He has been intentionally sidelined in his own autobiography, a point that Kendra points out to him in Act 2.
Every breath you've taken, every dream you've dreamt, GLORIA took it. They even renamed your memoir to GLORIA.
Dean acknowledges this by physically intimidating her and being escorted out of Starbucks. This all happens after he began manipulating Kendra into signing a non-disclosure agreement for her portrayal in his book. Dean's olive branch to Kendra throughout the first half of Act 2 is all in vain. She doesn't sign it, and he loses the war. He gives in to the pressure of the situation and buckles when he realizes his story in the greater context of the GLORIA tragedy doesn't fucking matter. His position as closest to GLORIA should have some weight to it, but shoehorning her into a thesis that doesn't fit doesn't sell the copy. And the writing is probably bad. We don't know, but the characters continuously state how trite his writing is.
This is about climbing every ladder in the publishing industry only to wind up in the same pit? What does that even mean?
The way I see it, Dean's willingness to overstep his own story in order to make the bigger sale is just the epitome of trashy media. No one is going to care about Dean's own part in his story, only about that one pop culture moment that is relatively tangential to the rest of the tale. And it's really kind of comparable to how like reality TV shows will be like teasing like one big moment in their one episode, and then it only turns out to be like maybe 30 seconds of screen time, and it was just totally blown totally out of proportion. But you watch the whole episode anyway for that one part that you were going to be interested in. And not only is that annoying for like a reader or a viewer, it is creatively bankrupt for an author to even try to shoehorn something in like that. Something that was already such like a personal journey that you had to retrofit into your thesis that wasn't even backed up by it at all. Dean's book isn't about GLORIA. It's about Dean. But the title wouldn't lead you to think that. Authors sacrificing their vision to catch on to a trend, or to make more money, or having their book mismarketed in order to make like bigger sales and reach a wider demographic, can have like a damaging reputation on that author. Dean is never given the chance to actually share his own story and have it be read as it was originally intended due to his agents chasing a trend, instead of letting the work stand on its own. Kendra is next and gives the audience most of the big ideas of the play. Kendra's first appearance is her arriving late to work and pestering Dean about how hungover he looks.
Dean, what's going on? You look like shit. Why?
Not only does she excuse herself from any and all work, but she gets out of her tasks by going on lengthy diatribes about the state of the world.
And also by freak chance, just happened to discover New York, when it too was the best, and apartments were like $1. Now, all these decades later, here we are. Now that the publishing world's collapsed and contracting all around us, mainly because they were too busy boozing and bluffing their way through the 80s and 90s, as opposed to, I don't know, anticipating the internet. Now that all the martini lunches have dried up, all these boomers are like, wait, I think being a good editor and building a sustainable media industry is actually a skill that requires work. What is this work? How do I do it? Can I start now?
Kendra is extremely vocal when it comes to social issues regarding class structure, pop culture, and the state of her workplace. She's a constant reminder of how much things stay the same, something that adds to Dean's annoyance. He knows she's right, and Kendra knows it too. She only picks away at him because she knows it'll do something.
Ew, is this Sarah Tweed? Why are we playing?
And she died.
What?
She died.
When?
Last night.
OD?
Yes.
Oh my god. Finally.
Kendra's biggest plot thing in the first act is advocating for a more well-written piece on Sarah Tweed, a bisexual singer who dies during the events of Act 1 in an unrelated drug overdose. Kendra believes she is the best one to write the profile on Tweed and is disgusted when someone else is able to get to it first, as she thinks they are misrepresenting the singer and framing the death as a gay suicide or something.
My fucking god, what the fuck is his title? Serenading Sappho? Why is Kara trying to make Sarah Tweed look like some huge lesbian?
Wasn't she?
As verbal as Kendra is about certain conflicts and probably putting issues where they don't actually belong, this is one where she actually approaches the appropriate people to get things done. At Dean's suggestion, she marches herself over to another department to give notes on the Sarah Tweed piece and makes a fool of herself when she doesn't know her own boss is the one who's editing it. Dean didn't know this either, which further drives a wedge between the two.
Where does it say that Austin is editing the piece?
Nowhere, just made that up.
What?
Kendra, for the rest of the play, is skeptical about Dean's motivations and can see right through him because he's such a bad actor. She and Dean have a very petty squabble and she leaves for Starbucks, saving herself from the impending massacre.
You know, I've been very unimpressed with you lately. And I'm wise and smart and capable and not a drug.
Why don't you just tweet about it on your Twitter?
Who are you? What miserable life you think for a
In Act 2, we find out Kendra still has connections with her previous boss and is in good financial and mental standing compared to Dean. She's also writing a book about the tragedy, but framing it more as an expose on her co-workers and the state of the magazine they all worked for. In this section, Kendra accuses Dean of being racist against their intern Miles, another reason for Dean to have her sign the NDA. Dean accuses her of being inflammatory, but is also secretly afraid that this will ruin him. Kendra gives him the rundown on how sad and pathetic he is trying to milk an experience for all it's worth without giving a broader, more well-constructed context. Dean's narrow slant on the story doesn't really give you a broader context on why people do what they do, why Gloria did what they did, but only a very narrow, vapid glance into one person's view on this one specific thing. Kendra touts herself as the Gloria storyteller, but ultimately embarrasses herself by attempting to reconnect with Nan when she enters what happens to be the only Starbucks in New York City. We learn in Act 3 that Kendra's book got farther than Dean's, but still wasn't published. Kendra's arc in the show presents itself as someone who is high and mighty and has a holier-than-thou opinion, which is another valid approach at assessing a tragedy. Kendra's rather impersonal approach to the material gives readers something else to chew on. Was Gloria just a crazy person who was happening to be wielding a gun that day? Does her story actually have a place in the annals of the United States history of gun violence? Because we never really get to see her book published, her ideas just remain as ideas, unable to be heard or posed to the readers who might be craving that kind of material. Or maybe, as Kendra says, everybody would have forgotten about it by the time that it even came hot off the presses. Kendra's approach to the material can, like Dean's, come across as a little disingenuous. Instead of creating a realistic and nuanced take of the office environment, Kendra poses herself as the highest and mightiest of the land, touting personality aspects of martyrdom and progressiveness. She passes judgments on her co-workers and her boss, but does not follow the traditional path of introspection that might have been more interesting, but she maneuvers herself as the one and only fair and saintly presence in that workspace. She exposes the racist, she calls out the crazy shooter, and she is just so standing by the side of the poor intern who was so mistreated. But she would never tell you about the things that she partook in. Overall, it's not a complete take, but one that just reeks of holier-than-thou sentiment. And while the previous two approaches were not strong or nuanced enough to sell that copy, there is one more character who is able to pull the threads and come out on top. Finally, we would be looking at Nan, the only character who appears in all 3 acts of the play. Nan is only a voice in Act 1, as the same actress who plays her also plays Gloria. Her presence is felt by everyone in the office, and she is constantly calling Dean in to take care of last-minute details for a trip abroad. We don't really get to learn a lot about Nan here, only that she's been throwing up a lot and she stresses Dean out.
Fuck me.
Guys, what's happening?
Nan is leaving this afternoon for the Edinburgh Book Fair because business made her book an earlier flight because it was cheaper. So now I have to reschedule half these meetings before the offices over there close.
We get a fuller picture in Act 2 when she shows up at Starbucks. The one Starbucks. She attempts to talk to Kendra about their book deals, but when she leaves, Nan complains about how annoying she was in the office. Dean then shows up, having left his NDA and manuscripts behind, and has a breakdown in front of Nan, an old co-worker, and the baristas. Nan attempts to pacify him by promising a meeting, but because we never see this, it's my headcanon that it never actually happens. Nan waxes poetic about her impending pregnancy and reveals that she realized she was pregnant during the shooting. She has a lengthy monologue where she discusses feelings of womanhood, growing old, and the genuine suckitude of the world she'll bring her children into. Her agent, thinking this will be the story of the decade, convinces Nan to write the thing down. Nan asks how much she could potentially get for the piece, implying she had already planned this. In Act 3, Nan visits a Los Angeles office where her book, the only successful one to come out of the tragedy, is being optioned as a miniseries. She runs into Lauren, another survivor of the GLORIA shooting, but doesn't recognize him. She is dressed to the nines and doesn't really care about anything except getting the meeting over with and musing with the people who will be giving her the money. She has won and gotten the lucrative GLORIA exposure Dean and Kendra wanted. What really sucks about Nan being the one to end up telling the GLORIA story is that she wasn't actually there to witness anything. She was hiding in her office. Kendra was too, granted, something that Dean calls her out on, but Nan isn't being disgustingly on the nose with how workplace politics are able to inform someone's mental state and isn't using the tragedy in order to fulfill some kind of trauma exploration. She is using the tragedy as a framing device and is integrating it as a baseline for her own story. And as dumb and vapid as that concept might sound, it is the thing that audiences wanted. They didn't need a sob story on how everything sucks on top of everything else sucking and how the whole world sucks because this one person has a terrible life. And they also did not need an expose on why these things happen and why people are just crazy lunatics running around. What audiences wanted was a heartfelt story with the trauma diffused and a life-altering story helmed by a creative professional. Nan starts at the top and ends at the top, which I think is unfair, but also can come across as a little disingenuous because she could have been the one person to change the environment in the office and none of this would have happened in the first place, leaving her without a book deal and a miniseries deal in the end. Her actions always self-serve, but she gets ahead because she knows how to play the game. She worked the angle that would appeal the most and cashed in. And despite not seeing anything directly like Dean or touting bad faith criticism about the state of the world like Kendra, she gave a sense of calm and order to an event that seemingly didn't have any. And what can you say other than, what a Chad. So if we are looking at the thesis of the play, that of who owns a story, we could make the argument that those who own the stories are the ones that make the most out of what they are given. Dean is the one living witness who saw everything unfold before his eyes and has the single most important understanding of the situation at hand. His point of view is valuable, and his intentions surely were in the right place, but Kendra's monologue about boomers not retiring from their jobs and constipating the job market rings more true for the rest of the play. Gloria can't tell the story. Dean and Kendra don't have the perspective, so it has to be Nan to tell the story, the one who comes across as the least affected. She also has the maturity of someone who's been around the block a few times and has the advantage by age, but also by her own position in the company, which poses her as the perfect one to be far enough removed from the tragedy in order to make more sense of it. Nan, at the top of the office structure, remains at the top of the structure because she knows what works. I personally respect BJJ's decision to go in this direction because I think it plays out more realistically than we think. Nan isn't intentionally trying to sabotage her coworkers. She's merely doing what she knows how to do because at some point she was given that opportunity to climb the corporate ladder. She was given those insider secrets and those indulges in success. And the narrative is controlled by her own steady hand, even if she didn't see anything. Gloria is a wonderful play and should be performed anywhere it can have an audience. The ideas presented in terms of toxic work cultures, who owns trauma, what makes a good story, and what causes someone to go postal, and how young professionals are supposed to survive in a world where older generations aren't retiring, are intriguing and interwoven into the script in ways that don't come across as preachy. You can find a coworker stereotype in almost any of the characters that might even get you examining your own work environment. The stories and themes are triggered by a gunshot, and how you react to that shot, to take your shot, reveals true character. Watch yourself, and be kind to people.